My guest, Michael Onuscheck. I've been looking forward to this for some time. We go way, way back. I know you always say, well, I've known you for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And you and I are probably north of 40, well north of 40.
Probably 40 plus.
Yeah,
that's
easily
right.
40 plus.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. I know you flew across the country, right? You come from
I did
California?
the San Francisco thing, then to Dallas, and then out here. So I spent a night in Dallas before I came out here. So
you got
it's great to be
place.
back in Boston. That's for sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's great. Why don't you just dive in a little bit about how we know each other? Maybe that's even better than saying, how did you start?
Yeah, well, I obviously, I think where we really got to know each other is through your brother, who was in the same class as I was grade-wise. But, where I really got to know you was on the athletic field, running track, playing football, doing those type of things, holding your blocks while you were running the high hurdles. I'm like, look, he's not that fast, and now you're putting obstacles in front of him. But hey, that's all good. But I mean, I grew up admiring the work ethic that you had to pour into athletics, especially wrestling. And it's great to see your success in your career today. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit with you.
You're way too nice. This is why people like you.
Yeah. Hey, my job is to make you feel good, Kurt. I'll kick you later.
Yeah, because you're about the only one that's going to do that
That's
today.
right. That's right.
Steph's going to be here tonight, and Maya for dinner. Those two will, this nice to Kurt thing will all end in about an hour.
Yeah, we'll have some fun tonight for sure to meet your daughter and spend some time with Steph again. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, well, we not only did we get to know each other through sports, but I think also through our parents.
Yeah,
our parents were very close. We spent a lot of time watching them entertain themselves.
I mean, I think we learned how to socialize with other adults through our folks, and actually our parents set expectations for us. I mean, I remember your mom and dad both setting very high expectations for me and the way that I behaved. I think your mom was probably one of the most influential people because she just would call you out and be there and say, hey, this is what I expect of you boys. And so she kept us on the straight and narrow. And then, our parents actually had your folks supported my folks as I lost my youngest brother from cancer. And knowing that you can rely on people and have those kind of experiences with folks is super important in how you build who you are, how you want to treat others, how when somebody's in need, you recognize the fact that you can step in and have a huge impact without really forcing the issue. And so, I appreciated all of that came through our parents and parent groups and all that other stuff. I remember getting picked up by folks, dropped off by folks, because my folks were at the hospital trying to manage my brother's care. So, those things, they become part of who you are as an individual and how you think about the world. So,
well, I think too, you talk about that social piece, right? And I think you and I are both pretty social guys, but we watched, and your dad loved life.
Oh yeah.
Right. He was a guy that loved life, and my dad.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. They loved it together. Yeah.
And we got to watch them enjoy life. Like a lot of people today, you look at the people around you and you work in a pretty intense environment. We'll get into that. But I don't think people enjoy their lives the way they did.
Yeah.
Right. And they enjoyed their friends. And, we used to do those dinner clubs and we would be serving drinks and waiting on them, but they had some fun.
Well, they had fun, but they also understood that they were building a relationship with one another that was enduring. And and they did. They had a blast, and the reason they were having so much fun was because they had people who had common interest, who had the same values, who were willing to push one another. I know as my dad went through his career, there were air pockets where things were good, and then there were some really bad times. And, what was interesting is that his friend group never changed. They were always there. They were always supportive of some of those air pockets. And so you look at that and you say, well, that principally is how I want to live my life. The other thing that was interesting about those folks is every single one of them made the other better. right? I mean, they didn't mess around. They actually made each other better human beings and held each other accountable as adults. And so as I started to build my friendships and my friend groups throughout my life, I always thought, you know, does this individual help me grow? Are they going to hold me accountable? Is this somebody I'm going to be able to rely on in tough times? Eventually you get to the point where you say, is this one of those people I want carrying my box? Because we are all going to die. And so you sit there and you say, you know, let's just get to the end of the story, and somebody's going to be carrying my box. Do I want this dude on the end of my box or not?
You have that list already.
Yeah, exactly. And the good news is that the list is still complete, which means none of my friends have unfortunately passed. But, you know, that's the reality of it, right? You got to have that kind of mentality as you build relationships. So.
That's an interesting thought process. I never really thought about who's carrying the box, right?
Exactly. So I knew, Kurt, I would show you something here that was worth
your time.
You
told me to give me something different, right?
Exactly. So
now I think we grew up Western Pennsylvania. Yeah. We grew up in a great time to grow up there, and we grew up with a great circumstance around the town we grew up in, and it was a tight community, and we rallied around, I mean, school and sports and friendship. You know, I think Steph and I are very fortunate. We have that where we live now in Ipswich. We have those same kinds of relationships and connections that I feel like I grew up with, and that's part of the reason why I think we like living there, and we have no intention of ever leaving. Because we've been able to create something that was very similar to what I had when I was a kid growing up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lisa and I have taken kind of a different course, right? I mean, we've moved 9 times throughout our marriage and our career. And, you know, there is an essence that occurs with every city or every place that you go. And I think it's how much you put into building the relationships with the people around you that make the place that you live. And then you carry those friendships forward throughout life. And obviously we gather a group of those people every chance that we get. You know, we'll go back to Pittsburgh after living together in Pittsburgh and go to a Steeler game, right? And our friends from Los Angeles, we were just in Costa Rica celebrating our birthdays together with that group of people, you know. And so, you know, I think you make life and you make your experiences no matter where you land. And there have been times where there are places we lived where we were kind of like, we're a cultural misfit here. It doesn't quite work for us, or it doesn't align to the value system that we want to raise our children in. We've got to go do something else. And some of those times were really crazy decisions, right? I mean, to move your family from Los Angeles to Paris, France, while they were entering high school is a nutcase thing to do. But for us, it was about establishing our children as global citizens and to get them broken out of what is really an odd culture in Southern California where it just appears like there's money everywhere, and I should have that BMW because our friends have that BMW kind of culture, and that just didn't align with our value systems.
Well, and you're in a unique. I mean, we grew up in, you know, upper middle class, right? We grew up in a pretty nice environment, but you know, you've attained a level of success that allows, you know, where you live and how you live, right? And how do you moderate that? I mean, it's something that Steph and I talked, and we were very deliberate about. The idea that, you know, the kids, I told Luke when he was 12, he had to get his first job. He started cutting grass.
That's right.
And he's like, we need that 12 years old. But, you know, so he learned how to, you know, he bought the mower, he broke the mower, he had clients, they wouldn't pay him, you know, all those. And then, you know, he had to teach Max how to do it when Max turned 12. And then they taught Maya how to do it. And, you know, I can remember we have this big field in the front of the house down over the side of the property. And we had these big 48-inch commercial mowers. And I used to let the kids go down there and just sort of let the mowers drag them around, basically. Yeah. And Steph used to say, do you think that's safe?
Yeah.
Like they're 12 years old and there's this 27 horsepower mower pulling them around the yard.
Exactly, right? Yeah, but I mean, look, we grew up in an environment where there was wealth, but the reality was, I think our parents put us out there and they said, no, you're going to work for a living, right? I mean, I use the analogy, I cut 22 yards when I was a junior and senior in high school. I mean, I started right when my brother died at 12.
Yeah.
My brother passed away, and, you know, my dad was like, you need to burn off some energy. You got to get out there and go mow some lawns. Well, you start doing that for enough neighbors, and they're like, well, that kid's doing it, and I don't have to do it. I'll pay him to do it. And you start to understand the value of money and the value that you create for others, right? And so, you know, cutting the hills in Western Pennsylvania is like this, right? You're a billy goat, and you learn how to do all that stuff. My dad sent me into the steel mills when I was in high school and in college to work there, to just help me recognize that, look, there are people who have a different standard of living. They have to work really hard. You need to respect them. You need to make sure that they understand that they're valued. And as you go through your life and your career, and as you build, you know, companies, everyone is important to the success of those organizations. And so I feel really fortunate being exposed to those type of environments where, you know, it was expected that everybody is valued and everybody's situation is important, and you need to recognize that they're doing the best that they can with the tools that they've been given as well.
Well, you and I have talked about this in the past. You did the steel mill thing, and then I did the cork cost and construction with Macero Brothers.
Exactly.
And it was, I mean, those are tough people. Like it was tough and it was brutal. And, you know, I remember I used to go back after, you know, the summer of working in those jobs, and my grades would be like great, because I'm like, absolutely, I don't want to end up doing that.
Not doing that again.
You know, but they also, I had a lot of fun in those jobs because they're great people, right?
Absolutely.
The people were great, and they were rich personalities.
That's exactly right. And they had some great stories, right? I mean, they would hold, I think about the guys that I met in the steel mills. I mean, we're traipsing around in you know, waist deep water and boilers and carrying pipes that are 20 foot long that weigh, you know, a couple 100 pounds. And they were just, this is what they did every day. Yet they came with a purpose. Like, we're building cars, we're building refrigerators, we're changing people's lives. And it wasn't that I'm just carrying the pipe and I'm not just paying for my family to be able to eat. It was they all had something in their spirit. The other thing is they love the dirt and the hard work, right? Some people want to sit behind a desk. Those folks, they decided, I really like being in the pit. And I really like the fire and the smoke and the dirtiness of it. And hey, everybody has a different view of the world and what they want out of their lives. And so I got to see that firsthand. And so I think that also was foundational in terms of how I lead and think about people.
And I think it gives us a humility that we realize that we've been given some tools and some opportunities that maybe everyone didn't have, and choices. Right, it's choices. You know, the guy that's doing those jobs, you know, he probably didn't have the same choices we had at the end of the day, but he developed a true love for what he did or she did because they could find purpose in it.
Yeah.
And so what do you think about today? I mean, you've run very big companies. Yeah. What do you think about, do you see it lacking? Why? What are your thoughts on sort of taking the optics of our childhood and applying it to today?
Yeah, look, I think the dynamic's very different today. I mean, I look at the way that my children are and how they've been raised and what they've been exposed to. That isn't really the world that I grew up in. I mean, we kind of bopped our kids all over the place, so they had to learn how to develop relationships and friendships. So I've got a little bit of a skewed perspective. But I do think that people today have a level of expectation of immediacy, and they're not willing to endure some of the hard work that's required in order to get to where they want to go. And they need, the thing that I've kind of learned over time is that, you know, life isn't kind of this linear thing. It's not a staircase. If anything, it's more of a spiral staircase. So you go through these experiences and you continually get wider as you go, and eventually you can master certain things, but you become a broader type leader. And so, I made specific choices in my career to go deep sometimes, and I made other choices to make sure I went super broad. And I think that people, as they think about their lives and their careers, they need to understand that sometimes you got to go super deep. And then there are other times where it's really important to get a little broader. And so those choices are important. And I think you need somebody to bounce those ideas off. I had great mentors that I could do that with, right? Some of my parents' adult friends, some of the colleagues, some of the bosses that I had, I was able to ask them really critical questions about how do I grow as a leader? How do I grow as somebody who can grow into a major leadership or management role? And so you do make choices, right? And those choices are important, and the inputs to those choices are important.
So if you think about, like, when you came out of college, what were you thinking about a career path? What did you think about when you first came out of school?
Oh, hell, I did an internship with Pfizer, right? So I went to work for a conglomerate pharmaceutical company, and I went in and did a summer internship in Manhattan, and they offered me a job, the following year, and I was like, this is great. I'm going to be in this great company. And it was selling dirt to the steel industry, right? Here's a kid from Pittsburgh who finally makes it to Manhattan, and the job offer that they give him is, we're going to have you sell dirt to the steel industry. So and all I knew is that, at the time, we graduated in Pennsylvania. Western Pennsylvania was in major decline, and it hadn't quite rebounded yet. So, I didn't really know what my access points were, and I didn't know what the opportunities could possibly look like. And so I took the first damn job I could find, which was this one. And, it wasn't until I met my wife, or my now wife, the girl of my dreams, and and she looked at me and she's like, "What the hell are you doing in the steel industry? Like, this is a dying industry, right? You're gonna build a career in a dying industry." And she was in healthcare, and she's like, "Hey, make the jump." And the moment that I got into healthcare, I mean, my father was an engineer and he was a metallurgist, and my mother was a nurse. I have a blend of those two skills. I have a scientific mind, yet I've got this kind of EQ relationship thing that works because of my mom. And when I got into healthcare, I realized the importance and the impact that we could make because of the products that we were developing. Now, I went into that industry thinking I was going to make a lot of money. And the reality is my first experience was a small child with CP and neuromuscular disease who was super kyphotic, and all his parents wanted him to be able to do is sit up in a wheelchair and see the world. And we did the procedure, and during the procedure, the child coded. They revived him. They flipped him over to sew him up and stop the procedure, and he coded again and passed away. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you move from, I'm in an industry where I want to make a lot of money, to I'm in an industry where that kid should never have died on the table. And we need to invent products that make that procedure safer and faster. And so from that point on, I kind of knew what my career path was going to be. It is focusing on that human need, that element of bringing value to humanity through healthcare and medicine, and doing it with a level of integrity where the products that we put into the marketplace, they change people's lives, and they do it in a way that they never really understood that they needed.
Do you think, you've been at the highest level of huge companies, Boston Scientific, Alcon. Do you think a lot of your colleagues at your level look at it that way?
A surprising number of them do, right? The reality is that anybody who gets into these roles, there are obviously people who are there for the economics of what we do. But when you're really in the boardrooms and you're talking about what it is that you're trying to achieve, unless you're meeting that unmet need, unless you're really meeting these challenges, you're not going to succeed. So in order to be successful, it kind of self-selects people who have an altruistic view to a certain extent. Not fully, but there are very few executives that I've worked with in the companies that I've worked with who don't put the patient first. I mean, who don't understand patient safety and don't understand the efficacy of these devices. Those folks self-select into other industries, and I think you do see in healthcare a real richness there. Now, do they articulate it the way I articulate it? Not necessarily, right? I'm grounded in trying to solve these problems because I've had life situations that kind of led me there. And you know me, Kurt. I lead kind of with my heart, and my head comes second. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. But I would say generally the people in healthcare are really focused on the right things, especially with companies like Boston Scientific and Medtronic and Alcon. I've had fabulous relationships with executives.
More so with Alcon because of you and the introduction you made there. I would say it's extraordinary people I've met. Yeah. Really extraordinary people that do care about that. But I've worked with so many companies that there's companies where it's driven by the dollar. It's driven by there are other things that become more important, right?
Yeah.
And I just think it's when you were talking about that child, right? Like you don't even have the words. The emotion in your face tells the whole story.
Yeah.
And and you don't get that. Sometimes somebody will say that same story, but the really heartfelt, you believe it with every ounce of you. Oh, yeah. Like it wasn't. So when I talk about those Eureka moments, that's like one of those for you where you're like,
it completely changed the trajectory of my career and the way that I thought about it. It actually changed the trajectory of the company that I was working for, because immediately after that, 2 days later, I got to meet the parents of the child. What? Yeah. Like the doctor's like, hey, can you help us figure this out, right? And then what I do is I got the engineers in there the very next week, and we started to try to figure out how to do this better. And so the nidus of that work and the trajectory of the company, now the company obviously was in a position to invest in the R&D, but they needed to know what to go fix. And so fortunately, I acted as that conduit and that bridge from a sales rep's position into the company and drawing in the right engineers to go solve the problem. And then once you see how that actually works in medical device, you get hooked on it, right? So we moved from spinal reconstruction to stereotactic image-guided neurosurgery for locating brain tumors or positioning electrical leads into the brain for DBS, to then restoring hearing with a cochlear implant and building a spinal cord stimulator for intractable pain. I mean, it goes on, and it kind of snowballs. And what was really interesting in my career was that you realize that no matter what level of the organization you're in, you can have that kind of impact. You just need to know how to communicate it. And you need to be persuasive enough in your argument as to why companies should invest in those type of things. And then you got to deliver results, right? So there were times where I felt serious economic pressure because corporations are run on a quarterly basis, and those executives who get sucked down that hole lose perspective a little bit. I've always tried to maintain the fact that this is a long game that we're playing, because there's a human being on the other side of it. Let's do the right things at the right time, and we'll deliver results long term. So,
but that's really hard to do in a publicly traded company.
Yeah,
right. It's really hard, right?
It is.
I mean, you lived it. I've observed it.
Yeah,
but you lived it.
Yeah.
It's because it is. I mean, everything from discovery all the way to FDA approval. We're not talking. We're talking years and years and years. As a matter of fact, I was just with a client the other day. They celebrated, it was a partnership, 17 years.
Yeah.
They finally got approval of a project.
Yeah.
A product. And 17 years, collaboration, right? That's like a majority of someone's career, from inception to when you actually get it to market.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Well, I mean, but again, you have to understand the clock speed of the business and the industry, right? When I moved to Southern California to work for Advanced Bionics, I knew that this wasn't going to be a one and done type of thing, right? We were a startup company with a cochlear implant with a vision to go out and really treat and manage chronic pain and to deal with movement disorders. And so it was going to be an investment. And I told Lisa it was only going to take 3 years, but I knew in the back of my head this was a 10-year gig.
This is being videoed.
I know, so and she's going to hear it. And she's going to hear it. She knows it. I mean, she holds me accountable because every time I say it's going to be 3, she knows it's going to be 5. So, but you have to understand that you're going to invest such of your own human sweat equity into these things. But on the other side of it, there are these tremendous rewards. And the other piece to that is you're going to meet some incredible human beings along the way who are going to help you make that journey possible. Because if you get into a room with Michael Onuscheck, what you're going to find is that I'm not the smartest person in the room. And if I am, then we're in damn bad shape.
You're in the wrong room.
We're in the wrong room. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, exactly.
So
but
we're really in trouble here.
Exactly. This is going nowhere without some help, Kurt.
The smartest guy in the room's not on camera.
Exactly. But so then it gets down to, okay, how do you put the right team around you so that you can be successful, and how do you understand what those people need to look like, and how do you blend a really diverse organization? How do you make that happen? And you and I've worked a lot on some really messed up parts of companies.
Yes.
I mean, but we're sitting there and I'm looking at what I've been dealt, the cards that I've been dealt, the people that I've been dealt. And you sit there and you say, look, there have to be skill sets here that we can really leverage, and people need to continue to grow and develop in their careers. And so, I invited you in multiple times to help me do a diagnostic on myself, right? What do I need to do to grow? Am I really reflecting who I am? The people around me, I want them to grow and I want them to continue to develop. And a lot of times people hit this mental roadblock, especially when you get to executive levels. They got there because they had certain skills and they could use those skills and just drive on them and drive on them and drive on them. Eventually, that tool doesn't work for them anymore, and they need to change.
We saw a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen a lot of that, the two of us.
We have, right? But then what we did was we put the mirror up to these people, and the diagnostic tools would say, okay, so I am struggling with those things. And then I had a coaching tool that I could use to help develop these people, right? I now had a validation that if you do these changes, we can help you grow in your career, and we can have you have a greater impact on this company. And more, I've seen those folks that we had to really pound with a 2x4 initially. Those are the ones who are making the greatest progress, and those are the ones that are going to make the biggest impact. And so, my role as a leader is to grow an organization and to grow the business. My objective as a leader is when I leave, I want that organization to be as successful or more successful for the patients out there than they were when I was there.
Yep.
Because that's the real stake that I have in what I do. It is to imprint, develop, grow, and then let the team take off. And in almost every instance in my career, when I left, they did better than they did when I was there. And so, I'm proud of that. At the same time, I know I might have been a roadblock, right?
Well, no, but I think, look, I've seen it. Boston Scientific, when we went in there, it was a great team, but the team got better under your tutelage, right? And I think because I had more time with you at Alcon, I got to see it from the very beginning, right? And I look at the growth of so many people that came up under you there. Yeah. And it's really amazing to see how they've grown. I mean, you look at how many people have not only grown within Alcon, but how many have gone on to get bigger jobs. Yeah. Right? A lot of them. Yeah. I mean, a lot of, right? You basically grew them to the point where there's nowhere at Alcon for them to grow. Yeah. They grew out of Alcon, right? Yeah. Which that speaks to the fact that you weren't afraid to develop the talent. Yeah. You embraced that concept of developing talent. I think one of the other things too is really interesting. You talk about the diagnostics helping you to grow. But I think really too, how telling they were. Like when I would get your scores and know you were leaving, it was like I would call you and say, "This gig's up."
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing, right? Because you do have the genetic things that stay in place, but you have the environmental things that really, for me, trigger, right? And it resonated. I remember sitting in the apartment in France, and you're like, "What the heck happened?" Like you're killing it, right? The market's growing at like 3% or 2%. You guys are growing at 9%, and your scores have gone off the ledge. And there's a personal component to that, right? My kids, my son, my daughter. It was time for us to leave France, come back to the United States. I had done everything that I could with that team to get them heading in the right direction. I had a ready successor who could take it on, and you don't want to block people. And at the same time, I wanted another great experience, right? I had gotten too far away from product development and innovation, and I had gotten so far downstream in commercial execution and operations that I was missing the things that I really enjoyed when I was standing in the operating room trying to figure out what a clinician needed. So getting repatriated through Novartis and Alcon and having the experience of trying to rebuild the surgical business at Alcon, man, what a perfect fit in a place in the country that met our needs as well. I mean, I wanted to be centrally located. I got tired of living on the coasts and then having 3-hour flights to do things. You sit in Dallas and you're 2.5, 3 hours anywhere you want to go, right? And so we strategically thought about that as well. But all of those things kind of brought together a team at Alcon and a new challenge for me. And it also told me that I want to be back in an industry where a perceptible outcome is important. So when you restore sight for somebody, you give them back their lives. Right. And when you create a cochlear implant, it's the same thing, or a spinal cord stimulator. So that it really started to focus in now on what is the last decade of my career going to look like in terms of trying to grow and build a business. And I was looking for something that really did impact people's lives, and they would know that it impacted their lives. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a constant theme for you. It's always been about having a mission that was intellectually stimulating, but gave you that sense of purpose to give back. Yeah. It's almost the same sentiment you expressed about the guy carrying the pipe through the steel mill.
Yeah.
Like to him, it's not carrying a pipe.
Yeah, that's right.
Like he's making people's lives better. And I just think it's really interesting how that link occurs for you. It's just, it's clear that that's definitely always present.
Yeah.
And it's a backdrop to the way you think and the way you approach life and the way you looked at this new opportunity, right? You went from a, close to $8 billion company to,
we got 24 employees. Right?
But they all fit in your car.
Exactly. I can buy them all lunch. I know all their names. I know their significant others as well. Yeah. I mean, there was a point in my career, another Eureka moment, where I realized that I wasn't graduating to the next phase of my life. So you go through elementary school, and then you're in high school. You got that 4-year window. Then you get in and you do college, and it's another 4-year thing. And then you get into your first job, and you graduate. There was a certain point in my career where I read a book by Tony Dungy, and he was like, you have to live a mission-driven life, right? Because you're gonna run out of these really quick successes, and you're gonna feel really unfulfilled in your life. And another one of those watershed moments was when I really started to say, well, what is the mission that I'm on? What am I trying to do with my life? And how am I bringing others along on the mission? Because it's a lot of fun to do it by yourself, but playing team sports, you realize you don't win when you're the cornerback sitting out on the edge. Mm-mm. You win when the cornerback plays the role that he's supposed to play when the other 10 guys are doing their job too, right? So you're not letting anybody go over the top.
It's all those times staying at home and not being in the play.
Yeah.
And then the one play that mattered where you stayed at home, you make the play. And right?
Exactly.
And it's about, we both played college football, and it's the same thing. It's about execution. It's and Coach Fusco, I was back at Westminster a couple of months ago, and I spoke, and Coach Fusco is my head coach.
Yeah.
He's now in a home, which is right on the campus.
Wow.
And I went over. He's sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
He's got Parkinson's, so he's crippled, but sharp as a tack. He was remembering plays that I ran. He goes, "You remember that play at Finley where you broke that long one?"
Yep.
And he goes, "We ran you twice in a row. The first time you got stuffed,
Yeah.
and then the second time." But the fact that he could remember with that detail, but I think that was one of those moments. He was the kind of person where we played football, but he wasn't teaching us football.
Yeah, that's right.
He was teaching us about life, and he was teaching us about. I can remember having a conversation in his office one time when I was a freshman, and he said, "I'm not happy with your grades." I'm like, "Coach, man, I'm like, I got all A's in 1B. What's wrong with that?" And he's like, "You're not taking enough classes." And so he made me take an extra class every semester.
Wow.
So I basically got a free year of college.
That's pretty
So,
cool.
out of that. And he said, "You're capable of doing it." And he goes, "At the end of this, you're probably never going to play football after this experience." But he said, "You'll have other experiences where an extra class every semester will have benefited you."
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that that's exactly what we do as leaders, right? We pull people aside, we grab them, and we say, "Look, you aren't actually living up to your potential." And there is an opportunity. Sometimes you're out of position, right? You're thinking that you're a marketer, but you're really not. You're probably somebody who's better in health economics, or you're better maybe in upstream R&D doing program management. It's again moving people on the field of life into positions where they can use their skills in a way where they become brilliant. And then the moment that they figure it out, that you're actually helping them, you change the trajectory of those individuals. And again, just like the coach pulling you aside saying, "Look, you can take an extra course." Sometimes I was pulling folks aside just saying, "Hey, look, the course that you need to take is a course in self-reflection. It's the course in learning who you are so that you can uncap your greatness." And they don't teach you that in school.
Nowhere.
Nobody.
Even corporations.
No.
I mean, until you brought me in, you can do Hogan and Stringfire and Korn Ferry and Myers-Briggs, but the problem with those programs, they tell you who you are. They don't tell you how to get better.
Yeah. Well, I never understood any of them anyway. Right? I mean, to be honest with you, I'd go through them and I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, so now what do I do? Like, what do I need to focus on? And actually, where's the value that I can take from these things?" I mean, you would. I mean, I would reflect on them, but it never really changed what I did and who I was and how I acted. And this, what we've built in a couple of instances is actually just the opposite of that. We clearly helped people see what they needed to do, and then we also wrapped it into their daily work. And so I could reinforce what they were working on in these programs and hold them accountable, or pull them aside and say, "Hey, look, if you just tweaked it this way, just a little bit, that would have sounded totally different to the audience than the way you said it," right?
Right.
And,
well, we've seen some really tough cases too. Some ones, we don't need to get names, but there's some people that we've seen that were pretty tough, and it's almost a shame that they hadn't had that opportunity sooner.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's, they're at the ends of their career and they've had great financial. They were actually rewarded in many cases for being pain in the ass. But they were not just a little bit rewarded, like made, very wealthy. But it's fun to be able to help people not only achieve in their careers, but find balance and find more joy in life.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, is that so many people in our industry get so focused on the intensity of doing the job that they let a lot of other things go. Their health, their families, their relationships. And it sounds trite. It sounds like, but it's so profound when you look at, if they can get that balance and understand where to focus, changes the whole game for a lot of people.
Yeah. Look, throughout my career, I've probably worked harder than I needed to work, right? But what I decided was I would carve those hours out of the morning time. So I would get up ultra early to do stuff to prepare for whatever I needed to do. Because nobody cares how hard you work while they sleep. Right. I learned that, my wife didn't care. My kids didn't care.
I'm the same way.
And so then I started carving out exercise into that period as well. And I found that was actually rejuvenating for me, and it kept me healthy and kept me sane. And actually the best ideas I have are when I'm out there doing something. I went for a run this morning by the river. I forgot how beautiful Boston really is, even though I hate the Patriots and the Bruins. I don't really care about the Celtics, but no, I'm just
two Pittsburgh guys.
Two Pittsburgh guys, yeah.
Ditto.
But exactly. But the reality is that you need that self-reflection time. You need the way to re-energize yourself. So the other thing that I've learned over time is what energizes me, and then what really pulls me down, and how do I make sure that I titrate in enough of those interjections of energy so that I can sustain a long stretch of time. Right? Because we're going into these things, we're kind of fire jumping. We don't know how long this thing is going to burn, and we've got to have the endurance to do it. So it's just finding those right balances. And I don't think people really stop and say, hey, what really does energize me?
What pulls you down?
Oh, if I have to sit in front of a spreadsheet for more than 30 minutes to try to figure it out and go through all this detailed stuff, I'm out, right? I mean, I'm not great at getting into the super uber detail, and I want people around me who are really good at that, who can then distillate it into something that I can talk to for 30 or 40 minutes. And then I can strategically pull together different ideas. When I'm pulling together disparate ideas into a business plan, I get excited and I get energized. Or when I'm working with an individual or coaching somebody up or trying to develop people, I get up.
Right.
So I used to have my admin just schedule in these meetings with people to mentor them after a meeting that was going to be a total drag for me. And, you can be smart about your calendar. And so the other thing that gets me down is when teams don't work together, when people are taking sides and what sits in the middle, that imperative, that thing that we're all supposed to be working towards is being pulled into the fiefdoms. That's really, it's one of those places where I get like no energy. If I'm in a meeting and that's what's happening, then it's just time for me to, to move on. And then I think the last thing is if it's not hard, I'm probably not the right guy for the assignment. Right. So it's always got to be something that others have either struggled with or weren't able to accomplish. I like to get in there and see if I can't make it happen. And I know it's not me that's going to make it happen, but it's the broader organization.
Well, you're the catalyst for the change.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's, and again, I kind of look back on my career, and every time I was in those situations, I galvanize the team through the imperative. What is it that our mission is? What are we trying to accomplish here? And why is it important? You have to add the why, otherwise people will drift off. And the other thing is you get to bump them right back to the why, right? Because I've explicitly told you why we're in this and why we're doing the work that we're doing. So, you ran a huge organization at Alcon, and I always like to ask people, what do you think of Michael? You're the leader, right? And I think some of the great comments that I had were at some of the really low-level people, like in some of the plants that we're working in, like in Malaysia, that people would say, I met him, and he sat and had lunch with me. And we sat there for an hour, and he never asked me about work. He asked me about my family, and they were just blown away by well, he's here. You would think all he wants to know is what's going on in the plants and what's working, what isn't working. But he took an hour, and all he wanted to know is about me. Yeah. And that really impressed them. The other thing from Jeanette, she said, Michael's always the best prepared person for a meeting. He doesn't just show up. He shows up with a purpose. Yeah. And she said, one of the things I learned from him is I don't spend enough time thinking. Yeah. I spend, and
we talked a lot about this idea of many leaders are so busy doing, they don't stop to step back and think.
Yeah.
And she said, that's one of the things that I learned about him, that and you're just describing that time. I'm the same way. Like my morning time, I tell people, like, think time.
Yeah.
Schedule time to just think.
Yeah.
Like blocks, 2-4 hours where you're not doing emails, but you're just like sitting, I'll go jump on my motorcycle or go sit at the beach and just take a 3x5 card and a pen. But people don't do that.
Yeah. I think that it's incredibly important to do that. I mean, especially as you become an executive, the higher you get, the more things that are coming at you and the more people who want you to tell them what to do. And so you got to learn how to push those back to individuals and say, I need you to think about that. My job is to think about these things here. And I do see there's an opportunity for people to spend a little bit more time. Well, you're working 8 hours a day. What does it take you to find the one most productive hour of your day? I don't know whether it's at 8 o'clock at night or whether it's at 5:30 in the morning, but find the most productive hour of your day and dedicate it to thinking. Just dedicate that 1 hour, and you do that 5 days a week or 7 days a week. Your productivity shoots off the charts. And I don't think people get that. They get on the treadmill, and that treadmill's running, and they're trying to answer every email, and they're trying to make every meeting, and they're trying to be, everything to everyone.
It's a to-do list. They're building their to-do list. Yeah. They're like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to call this person, I got to call that. They're constantly creating their to-do list, and they're not thinking about, well, wait a minute, do I need to even be doing half this shit?
Yeah.
Just let it go. But they get caught in, a buddy of mine used to always say, it's the course of least resistance. Mm-hmm. We started, Rick and I, we started at Ernst & Winnie. Yeah. And he stayed the longest of anybody of our 27 that started that year. He stayed the longest. I say, why did you stay? And he said, I knew the job. I knew how to do it. I knew how to advance. Yeah. It was the course of least resistance. Yeah. Like it was just easy.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people, that's fine, right? I mean, that is the life choice that they're making. But it isn't a life choice if you didn't do it intentionally. Sometimes people's circumstances put them in a position where they've got to make those choices, and they have to stay in line because going out would be disruptive in ways that they can't manage, right? But that's an intentional choice. And again, we talk about choices. You look at people who are intentionally choosing not to do the obvious, like take time to think about your career, take time to think about what you need to learn and where you need to grow. That's an intentional choice as well. And so the wake-up call is when you finally have a manager or a leader who puts their arm around you and says, you know what, you're never going to get where you want to go because you're not laying in the stepping stones to allow you to be there. And, so that intentional time is really important, and you can carve it out. I guarantee you can carve it out because I now that I'm sometimes separated from my wife because I'm up in San Francisco, I realize I can flip on the TV and just let my mind melt, or I can sit there and I can think about important things that I need to be doing or need to do to guide the company. And so, there's just a lot of time that people are letting escape through their fingers. Now, I will tell you, on the other side of that, you need some time to decompress, and you've got to get away from it. So if you're sticking on it all the time, that's not a good idea either. And just find those things that energize you, whether it's family, friends, athletics, opera, whatever it is. You've got to make sure you're making room for those things in your life.
Well, and I think a lot of people, I talk to people and I'll say, what do you do for fun? They're like, not a lot. I have 2 young kids and I'm working crazy hours, and other than the kids, there's nothing. Yeah. And even as busy as Stephen and I were with 3 kids, we always found time to sort of get a little bit of that, get a break, go out to dinner. Yeah. So we've always found that way to sort of decompress. Yeah. And it's so important to do it. And so many people sort of like, I don't have time for that. And I think you got to do it. it's a shame that people think you can't, or they get themselves in a situation where they feel that they don't have the time. But it's easy to do. You see it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen this in
Yeah,
a profound way with the people that work for you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you do see that it then hinders your performance, right? Your ability to operate, because you're worried about what's happening at home when you're at work, and you're worried about your work when you're at home. So I very much compartmentalize my life into those periods where, you know, when I get off work and I go home, I used to carry my phone around and I used to look at every email and I used to do all that stuff. Now I throw it on the counter and my wife's like, I've been texting you, where the heck are you?
Yeah,
and I'm like, honey, I'm sorry. But, you know, so you do have to find those triggers where you're saying, I'm done. I'll let that go unless there's a serious emergency or you know an emergency's coming. I can disregard and I can set things down. If you are a leader, there are some subtle cues that you give your associates that they can't stop working. And it's things like you sending emails on the weekend and you checking in.
That. I used to do it.
Well, I mean, we all did it, right? I'll work. If I have work to do, I'll do it and I'll make sure I'm offline. And then Monday morning, I'll plug in and then it'll all get sent, right? But I don't want my associates to think that they have to be working because I'm working, right?
And I used to do it like and say, well, I don't expect them to respond on a Saturday or Sunday.
The nonverbal cue is I'm working. You should be too, though, right?
So, you're right. Yeah. But when there's a certain people that would say that's okay. Like, it's okay. If they didn't get it, that's too bad for them. But you're right. Like as a leader, people were going, especially if they admire you. Yeah. Like, because they're not going to want to let you down.
Yeah, that's right. But, you know, I've actually learned that from a lot of executives too. I mean, they intentionally do that. And I've really appreciated that with my most recent leadership teams where I never heard from them on a Friday night, Saturday, or a Sunday. If it was an urgent, they would call me. I mean, so, you know, that's where you learn it. You kind of get to that level and you're like, well, these other guys are surviving without having to do this. I should be able to do the same thing. So I didn't learn it until a little bit later that was a subtle cue that they needed to be at work and they needed to be thinking about the job. So, but work-life balance, I don't know if you ever really achieve that. I think what you wind up doing.
I don't have it yet.
Yeah, you compartmentalize it, right? You compartmentalize. Now is a serious, intense work week. And then I'm going to get to the other side of that. And then I'm going to take the half day on Friday and just go do something with my spouse or my children or my friends that kind of get me back up the curve, right? And so that's what people need to learn how to do. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. Talk a little bit about your family. You know, obviously you shared with us that your brother passed.
Yeah.
But, you know, your mom and dad died relatively young, right?
Yep.
And your dad died from a procedure that went bad, right?
Yeah, right.
So maybe talk a little bit about that, because that has to also have a bearing on sort of how you've matured as a person and how you look at life, right?
Yeah. Look, you have a lot of life experiences that, you know, I trace a lifeline, right? And you look back at your father's passing, suddenly your brother's passing, my other brother who has, you know, special needs, my mom passing, and my wife and I, when we got married, like the first 3 years, we lost 9 or 11 people. I can't remember who were directly related to us. And you go through that and you're kind of like, well, that gal, well, we're not going to have to worry about anybody being in an old folks home because they've all passed, right? We're not going to have those struggles. But what I started to do is trace my lifeline, and you see these tragedies in your life are actually where you deepen who you are, and you know they're all below the line kind of things, right? They're not the sale of a company for a bunch of money, or the successful product launch, which is above the line. They were the experiences of your brother passing away and you learning who you are as a human being, or your father passing away and you not resenting the individual who happened to be the physician that did that, right? Because that's just negative baggage that doesn't help you. It's not going to change the outcome. You can be bitter about it, or you can tuck that in the back and just say, you know, when somebody is confronted, or when I'm confronted by something that's difficult, I can rely on the strength that I got by letting that individual go, right?
Right.
And so, you know,
Well,
it's...
none of us get out of this alive.
No, that's right.
And the unfortunate thing is that we don't know, like my parents, the fact that they're both still here, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. I mean,
Yeah, if we were putting odds down on the table,
your parents would be here, mine wouldn't.
Exactly. I mean, and we're blessed because your parents are here, because your mom still makes the meanest chocolate chip cookie in the world. But
she does. Yeah. She does. But my dad's had massive heart issues for a long time. And, you know, I always think of, God, these guys they just keep, you know, my dad, all his friends are dead.
Yeah.
They're all dead. Not just his first set of friends, but now like his second set are all just about gone.
Right.
And you're like, wow. And unlike you, I haven't had that where, you know, I've lost grandparents, but you know, they're of an age that it's to be expected. But having somebody young, or, you know, a sibling, I haven't had that kind of tragedy, and, you know, and it's...
Well, I'll be here for you when it happens, right? I mean, the reality is there's no easy way for it to happen.
No.
And it's going to happen. So, you know, you prepare yourself for what that's going to look like. You know, the fact that we were orphaned, how weird is that, right? Both your parents have passed, now you're an orphan, and you've got siblings that you can rely on. You've got friends that you can rely on. There's perspective there, right? And I think that that's what carries us through, and it helps us. My wife and I got to rely on each other through the majority of that, right? I didn't have to go to an outside circle. She was great about it. And, you know, I have one great regret. When her mom passed away, I didn't get on an airplane and return to the United States, because they knew that she was going to be cremated and they were going to push the memorial off. I should have gotten on the damn plane. It's truly one of those regrettable moments, but she doesn't see it that way. She's like, I told you not to come home. I'm like, yeah, I still should have gotten on the plane, right? So
I do that same stuff where you make a decision and like logically you say, well, the timing and all of that, and then you're like, it's not about logic.
No,
it's not about logic.
No.
You just like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, how did I miss that one?
Right.
Especially with an EQ that, you know, that's who I am, right? So, but, you know, she doesn't hold it against me. But it's one thing that I would tell anybody. When those situations happen, that's when you show up, right? Yeah. So, and luckily I've learned how to manage all through that. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. And I think also too, something that you alluded to, I think is, you know, you and I have both been very lucky to find the right partner.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's just, you know, it makes, especially when you have lives where, you know, we both have traveled a lot. A lot of my career has been traveling. Steph, I left her with 3 kids in diapers at home, and I was gone, you know, Monday through Friday, and she had the 3 kids. And, you know, our kids are what they are because she was just awesome. Yeah. You know, in those early formative years when I was, you know, I come home on a Friday and she'd say, read a book to the kids, you know, and I'd say, Luke, you can read to the 2 younger ones. And
exactly.
Sleeping, right?
Yeah.
But
well, no, I think, look, it's like a lot of things. I mean, not everybody's going to get it perfect, right? And they're going to make mistakes in their relationships or picking the right individuals. We got truly lucky. I mean, I met this Iowa farm girl which immediately calibrated it to, she doesn't have high expectations, right? I mean, she just doesn't want me riding on a tractor. If I can get her out of the cornfields of Iowa, this is a win, right? So you know what you're getting into. But also, you know, I think my wife is brilliant at what she does and who she is, and you know, she's done things that I certainly couldn't have done in my career, in our personal lives, in our social lives. I mean, if my wife wasn't there, I would not have the social network that I have, because she spends so much time making sure that we are deliberate in meeting back with all those people that we've gathered throughout our lives. And she's always the one who says, hey, we haven't seen those folks in a while. Why don't we go do it? And I'm like, oh man, here, I just lived in a hotel for 5 straight days. And now you want me to jump on a plane and go see somebody. And she's like, yeah, that's what we're doing. I'm like, okay, pack it up, and we're going again. So, we find the right person to live with and grow with and develop with. And that is really critical to the success that I've had in my career and the relationships that I have with folks.
Yeah, and I think too, now, I mean, our kids are launched, right? Both of us are, we each have 3 children and they're launched. And it's a really nice time for the 2 of us to find even more time to connect and be with each other and sort of enjoy and start to think about, I feel like for a lot of time in our lives, we're running to catch up to the kids.
Yeah.
And now you're sort of stepping back and watching them become adults. We're going to go downstairs in a couple minutes here and have some cocktails with the team. But Maya, it's sort of fun. Like, she's a junior scientist. She's working at a company, and she's dealing with people. Dad, there's people that that are like going after our team, and they're that political dynamic that starts to play out even at a young age, and and she's never had that before. Right. Before it's just going to class, and now there's this whole nother dynamic. She's like, Dad, it's not just about doing the assays and getting it right. It's now there's the older scientist, the younger scientist, and so it's sort of fun to see them now start to explore that. But I'm hoping that you and I are able to put them in a better place than we were at that age, to give them a little bit greater advantage on how to absorb it, engage in it, not be overly stressed by it, and move on and keep growing. That's the big thing I look at now. Can we help our kids shortcut that learning process that you and I probably took a lot longer to get to?
That's certainly true, right? I mean, we get an opportunity because of our relationship with our children to mentor them and to guide them, right? The fact that they actually call us and they give us this kind of problem statement, like, hey, how should I be thinking about that? That's a huge win as a parent, right? It's that open line of communication, right? And then not to overcook it, right? Like to push it back to them and to have them think through how they should be managing these situations and what are the alternative choices that they can make in dealing with it. Helping them learn that they've got to work into an environment that isn't the little happy home that they grew up in, or the high school and college that group that you form.
Right.
You actually have to go work with people who are different than you and have a different view of the world, right? So I think that's the one thing that our kids can benefit from, and we can benefit other people's children. I take calls from kids all the time who are thinking about choices, life choices, and it's because it's super rewarding to me to give it back. And so, I think if people know they have access to people like us, it's a real opportunity. They don't know they can take advantage of it, but what I will tell you is that people like you and I are the first people to take a coffee on Saturday morning with some kid we don't even know.
I do it all the time.
Just because our kids asked us to do it. Right. And,
or somebody calls me and says, hey, will you talk to my kid? Or I do it all the time. I'm doing some mentoring now for kids that I didn't even know. And somebody said, hey, it's actually someone runs entrepreneurship at one of the colleges, said, I got this student. She's really intense, really bright. Yeah. She's having so much such a difficult time with balance in her life.
Yeah.
I said, I'll talk to her.
Yeah,
I'm happy to do it, because I wish somebody, would do that for my children. If something ever happened to me, you would hope that somebody's there to pick it up and help our children, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, again, I think that it gives us being able to give some perspective is really important. And it's something that to me, it energizes me. To others, it probably doesn't. It could possibly be an annoyance. But to me, I get jazzed on it. And my wife knows I'm jazzed on it. And we'll be on vacation and she'll be like, why are you taking this call? And I'm like, because I want to. Right. I'm on vacation too. This is part of my vacation. So, you just have to put boundaries on things and make sure that they fit into the rest of your life. But yeah.
It's funny because I've so enjoyed this, and the time just flew by, this chat. But I hear you say things, and it's almost like you're in my head saying the same things that I'm thinking. Really, and
that scares me, Kurt.
I think a lot of it is just we grew up in a very similar way with parents that were very similar, and our lives crossed at a time where I think we left. You went to the same size school I did. You went to W&J, I went to Westminster. But a lot of the things that were early in those formative years, I think, have left that mark on us.
Yeah.
And so it's great to spend this time. You and I, this is probably the longest we've had to chat, other than that dinner we had when I was down, right? Because we just don't get, usually our conversations are
30
brief.
minute and hey, or we're trying to knock out problems. And help people move forward in their careers, right? So we're focused on other things. Look, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to come in and do this today, Kurt, and I'm glad that it timed out perfectly with a visit that I had to Boston. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Oh, it's just, I feel so lucky that you could be here and do this, and I hope that I hope we have more time to chat like this. Not less, that's for sure.
Well, I got to raise money, and Boston has a lot of it, so I might be back.
And I know people,
and folks. Hey, this could work out.
This
great,
could
Kurt.
work out well. Thanks so much, Mike.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Kurt.
Take care, bye.
Thanks.